At the end of autumn, my sister Kate and I were sent to the village to live with our Aunt Elizabeth. Her house was located in a remote area, surrounded by dense forest. The house was ancient and mysterious, with a large attic room that Aunt Elizabeth never opened. When we got to the house, we discovered that my aunt was delayed and no one was home. She left us a key under a flower pot in the garden. From the garden I could see the attic window, and it even seemed to me that someone was looking at me intently. It was like this the whole time we were looking for the key. At some point I couldn't stand it and looked at the top window of the house, but it was empty. My sister and I went into the house and decided to make ourselves some delicious tea and cookies. I didn't find any tea in the kitchen and decided to go to the pantry to get it. This is a small windowless room next to the kitchen where food is stored. When I went there and started looking for tea, my sister suddenly screamed. I ran up to her and she told me, someone was laughing on the floor above. I told her that she was tired from the road and it seemed to her. To convince her, I went to the second floor. There were 6 rooms on the second floor. And they were all locked, except one. The last door was open. As I approached the door, I heard a music box playing very faintly. Probably my aunt left it. That's exactly what I thought. I walked into the room and saw a chest of drawers on which stood a box and played music. I turned off the box, but decided to check what was in the chest of drawers. My sister came running to me, she was lonely. We started looking through the dresser drawers and were surprised to find Aunt Elizabeth's childhood diary, in which the key was hidden. We started reading the diary and learned how she used to run into the forest and pick berries there. That there was a river behind the forest and she often went there with her father to fish and eat delicious meat pies. It also said that Aunt Elizabeth hears some voices on the roof of the house. And often, when her parents leave in the evening, she feels creepy and uneasy in the house. At that moment I realized that the key that was in the book was the key to the attic. You know, I can't just pass by this opportunity to be at the top. My sister Kate was scared and I wanted to prove to her that there was nothing wrong. So I told her, let's just see what's up there. I put the diary back in the box and we left the room and walked towards the attic. At that moment the door slammed behind us. Kate screamed, and I thought it was a draft. I tried to pull the handle towards myself to open the door to this room, but it did not open. I had to calm Kate down. He told her that there was nothing wrong with it, it was just an old door that suddenly closed due to a draft. When Kate stopped crying, we decided that we would go together holding hands to the attic. When we began to approach the stairs to the attic it became cool and uneasy. It seemed to me that night had suddenly fallen. The excitement grew with every step. What will we see there? What if this is all an aunt's joke and she's there now? I pulled the rope and a ladder came down to us. We started to climb it and it seems that my heart was beating so hard that it almost jumped out of my chest. When we climbed the last step, there was a huge door with a padlock in front of us. I inserted the key and turned it. The lock fell down and the door opened. The room was silent, the sunset illuminating the room in a bright red light. But he no longer got into the corners and it was dark. I saw boxes that probably contained long, forgotten things. But there was a shelf on the right and there were dolls on it. These were old dolls that looked at us with their plastic eyes. I didn't think anything of it and walked through the attic, when suddenly Kate squeezed my hand tightly. I turned to her and saw her pointing her finger at the doll. Looking from her hand to the shelf with dolls, I saw that she was pointing at a doll that was looking straight at us. How is this possible? Absolutely all of the dolls were looking at the door leading down. And now one of them is looking directly at us, and we are standing in the middle of the room. I screamed too and suddenly the doll smiled. She began to move her thin fake lips and extended her arms towards us. I screamed and my sister and I ran to the door. I wanted to quickly find myself on the street, or better yet, in another city, where my mom and dad are waiting for me, away from this house. Suddenly all the dolls started laughing, I looked back and saw that they were moving straight towards us. My legs began to give way. I put my sister in front of me to protect her. One of the dolls grabbed me by the bottom of my sweater. The sister was able to run out onto the stairs and began to go down. I hit the doll with force and flew out onto the stairs. He closed the door behind him. I heard little hands knocking on it. There were a lot of them, and there was a strong, frequent drumbeat. I ran down the stairs and fell. He jumped up and raised the ladder. My sister and I ran outside and waited for Aunt Elizabeth to arrive. When she arrived, we told her everything. And she told us that she doesn't remember any diary. That we made it all up. Together with her, we went up to the attic again and there were no dolls there. There were only empty shelves and boxes. We had a great time the next week and played a lot and baked cookies. It was only when we were already driving away that I, sitting in the back seat of the car, decided to look out the car window at the house. And he accidentally looked at the top window of the attic. The doll stood there and looked at me. I didn't believe it, closed my eyes and shook my head violently. When I opened my eyes, the doll was no longer there. My sister and I were on our way home to our parents. A young couple, Alex and Eva, have just bought a house in a quiet suburb. They were delighted with their new home and hoped for a calm and happy life. However, soon after moving, they encountered an incomprehensible and frightening phenomenon. Every night, at the stroke of midnight, someone knocked on the door exactly 3 times. Alex and Eva couldn't figure out who it could be, since they didn't see anyone when they opened the door. They reached out to neighbors to find out more about what was happening. Neighbors shared their story. There is an ancient belief in the area about evil spirits that can enter houses through mirrors. They say that if you cover all the mirrors in the house, it will help get rid of unwanted guests. Alex and Eve decided to test this theory. They covered all the mirrors in the house, hoping that this would help them stop these strange visits. But to their horror, the knocking on the door continued night after night. They felt increasingly scared and depressed. Every night the knocking pierced their souls, giving them no peace. They began to lose sleep, living in constant fear and anxiety. Alex and Eve decided to seek help from a paranormal expert. The specialist who came performed a ritual of cleansing the house and determined that the evil was inside the mirrors. He suggested that they destroy all the mirrors to completely get rid of the problem. The couple agreed to this step. They broke every mirror in the house, hoping this would stop the nightly visits. But to their surprise, the knocking on the door did not stop. They were desperate and scared. They decided to leave the house and rented a hotel room, hoping that this would help them get rid of this nightmare. However, when they went to bed in the room, the knocking on the door began again. They were terrified. Even the hotel administrator could not help them and said that this was his first time. Alex and Eva decided to return to the house and live with this strange phenomenon. They realized that this is part of their life and they must accept it. Every night when the knocking on the door started, they simply ignored it, trying not to pay attention to it. Over time, the knocking on the door became weaker and less frequent. Alex and Eva learned to live with this phenomenon, accepting it as an integral part of their new life. They never knew who or what was causing these nightly visits. The mysterious phenomenon remains unsolved. Alex and Eva simply accepted it as their fate and continued to live in their house, hoping that it would never return in full force. It was a normal Friday night and 2 teenagers, Jason and Lily, were home alone for one night. Their parents were away for the weekend, and the couple decided to have fun watching movies and talking until late. But when the clock showed midnight, everything changed. From the darkness on the street came the sounds of sirens and loud voices that sounded like police commands. Jason and Lily looked at each other in fear. They couldn't understand what was happening. The doorbell rang attracted their attention. They quickly ran up, looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in police uniforms. The teenagers' hearts began to beat with fear. They were sure that these were real policemen, but why did they come so late? When they asked the police what they needed, the police were silent and looked at the door. Jason and Lily decided to call the police to make sure they were real cops. However, to their horror, no one answered the call. They tried several times, but in vain. This only increased their anxiety. That's how they realized that someone had turned off the phone. The teenagers decided to block the door and hide in the room. They were scared and didn't know what to do. Their heartbeats increased when they heard the sound of breaking glass. They realized that the police had broken into the house. At that moment, the door of the room opened and two young guys in police uniform entered the room. Jason and Lily looked at them in fear, not knowing what to expect. The guys started laughing and explained that they just wanted to prank their friends. It turned out that these guys, Michael and Tom, were neighbors of teenagers and they were very bored. They decided to come up with a joke to have fun. They put on the police uniforms they found in Michael's basement and decided to go into the house to scare Jason and Lily. But the joke got out of control, and they realized that these were not their neighbors. The neighbors left a few days ago and now it was definitely not their neighbors who stood in front of them. Jason laughed and slowly tried to walk towards the exit when suddenly one of the police officers grabbed him. The next day, the parents arrived, but could not find Jason and Lily. An investigation began and the police found out that the robbers tried to get into the neighbor's house and that there was an alarm there. Then they decided to go into the house where Jason and Lily were. They robbed the house and took the teenagers with them, who were never seen again.